Broadcasting live from the Capitol OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Good morning. Welcome to I have to change my background. Live TV, baby. Racing Across America on this Sunday morning. Seth Merrow in the studio. I'll right after the show, boom, I'll go back to OTB Live because we'll be back in a couple hours, 2.5 hours or so with OTB Live for Sunday afternoon, looking at some of the racing action. But for now, it's Racing Across America with a typical Sunday morning recap of nice racing yesterday all over the place, including, it seemed like last week was going to wind up the Triple Crown and Derby implications, but the Lexington yesterday, I was not sure of the points yesterday, and Disarm running third in the Lexington, I thought had still just missed making the cut, but third was a couple more points than I had realized, and so Disarm jumps into the mix right now. The connections, though, said, given now we're closer to the Derby than most connections like these days, they were going to kind of, reevaluate because they did finish third. So reevaluate and see what the decision making would be with Disarm. But Disarm, after yesterday's Lexington, is in the 20, and so they have the luxury of making that decision. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I read Knock Jace's Road just out. So we'll see how things shake out. I mean, so far, knock wood. There was an article in the Racing Form, I think it was Marty McGee, who has announced his retirement. Maybe we'll try to get Marty on the show at some point, because we used to have Marty fairly regularly. But he's going to go and be jockey agent for Joe Talamo. But I think he wrote the article that talked about the points are historically, the cutoff is a little bit higher than it has been historically. And part of that is, as I say, knock wood, everybody's kind of holding together health-wise, and that's always great. And hope it continues for the next, couple of weeks into the Derby itself. And we have a nice, healthy group of runners that show up. And again, it's a little bit of a puzzle this year with Forte. And I said on Steve Bick's show this week that with the 2 triple-digit buyers for Practical Move, I would not be shocked to see him as the favorite because bettors love those buyer figures. I'm one of them. I use the buyer figures, but the 2 triple digits and the reassessment on Forte's number going down after the retiming of the Florida Derby. Angel of Empire is interesting to me. I grabbed a little future pool wager, so I'm looking forward to that. But we'll talk a little bit about that this morning as well. I'm going to do some recaps of some of yesterday's stakes action and actually go back and watch the Santa Anita Derby because last weekend were those last 3 Derby preps. But being Easter on Sunday, we didn't have any programming here on the network, so we didn't get to recap those 3 major Derby preps. So I'll take a look at the Santa Anita Derby. But then a little bit later on, we'll be joined by Bob Ehalt from the Blood Horse. You also see him on America's Best Racing. And he did a couple of previews for a Blood Horse on the Apple Blossom and the Lexington. So I thought, we'll bring him in, talk a little Apple Blossom and Lexington with Bob. But also he's been doing some recaps and follow-ups for and previews for the Derby preps. So I thought that'd give us a chance to talk about the wood and the bluegrass from last week and get Bob's thoughts also on the Arkansas Derby and the Florida Derby. So Bob Ehalt coming up just a little past the bottom of the hour. But that said, there was, again, great racing yesterday that I'll have in the first segment. Maybe we'll have a little handicapping later, depending on how long we go here in segment number 1. I do want to remind you that today here at the Clubhouse Racebook, there's a $100 Play the Board contest. So keep that in mind for this afternoon if you'd like to come down and join us. Nice crowd in here yesterday for Saturday. Again, fun day all over. And you are invited again to come down today, Sunday afternoon. Grab a little lunch if you want to, but either way, come on and join a group of like-minded people watching and wagering this afternoon at the Clubhouse Racebook, and maybe you wind up a little extra something with the Play Board contest today, right here at Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. All right, I'm going to kick into the action. We'll start with Oaklawn. And again, the highlight yesterday, it was a short field, but promised to be a battle with Secret Oath and Clairiere. And we'll see later. It lived up to it. The highlight was the Apple Blossom yesterday. But the undercard, that was a fun race to watch and, root one way or the other, Secret Oath or Clairiere. And then in a short field, there was a speedster who had the possibility, will this horse steal it in a short field? But more from a betting perspective, the Count Fleet, the sprint on the day was as I say, the more interesting race, perhaps betting-wise, certainly. We talked a little bit about this one yesterday with Jim Byers. I had mentioned that Skelly, who was the eventual winner, was intriguing to me. I used Tejano Twist on top, however, and Jim mentioned the speed. Tejano Twist is the number 5, and it's going to get up to be 3rd. But Skelly from Steve Asmussen takes him all the way around. I had that one down in the 3rd spot. Strobe runs 2nd. I had that one 2nd. So my top 3 here are just kind of flip-flopped in position, with Skelly getting it done over Strobe, over Tejano Twist. Surveillance runs 3rd in there. But Skelly, who came in, had not raced in a stakes race before, but was an Asmussen sprinter, and it just seems like I've mentioned it quite a bit over probably the past year, because it seems like the past couple of years, Steve Asmussen has just been loaded with really talented sprinters, and this 4-year-old may be another one of those. Came into the race, 3 wins, 3 seconds, and 7 starts, but again, no stakes tries until yesterday. However, had won an optional claimer back on March 17th with a triple-digit 100 buyer figure, and followed it up very nicely here. Ricardo Santana on board, and nice performance. We shall see where this one goes moving forward, but you would have to think that, they will aim for some of the major sprint stakes during the year, because, again, it was a nice 109 and 2. I did not see a buyer. Just let me check some of the usual suspects here. I tried earlier and I didn't see anything. Let me see if I can come up. Sometimes there's a list of buyers popped out there. I am not seeing. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything on the usual spots. So again, no buyer up, but you would have to think it'd probably be nice given the final time of the race. And funky weather. When we had Jim Byers on, I mentioned him yesterday. You guys down there in Oaklawn have been snake bit, but it seems like the weather's turned around a little bit. And he said, yeah, mostly it has. Since Arkansas Derby weekend, the weather has moderated and been fairly nice. It's just like being in here in the afternoon so far this season. The early part of the season, it looked like Oaklawn just week after week was facing some inclement weather. Well, it was nice weather for most of the day yesterday, but then I read on Twitter at about 4 o'clock their time, they were allowing people into the infield yesterday, but about 4 o'clock they were taking people, saying, okay, we have to evacuate the infield or leave the infield. Evacuate may be too strong of a word, but anytime there's some inclement weather coming in those situations, an infield only has kind of the one main access point, no matter what track you're at. So you want to kind of be ahead of any situation. So they did that. And then a little weather came in from what I read, and then moved out. And one of the follow-up articles in the Racing Forum said by the end of the day, there was a nice rainbow over the track, and it had gotten sunny again. And also the article I read estimated, it's Oaklawn. If you've never been and you like to visit tracks live, Oaklawn is one to put on your list, because it's very Saratoga-like, the town and whatnot, but also the weekends. They estimated 35,000 there yesterday, which is a Saratoga-like crowd for the Count Fleet, Skelly, and then again a little bit later on we'll watch a replay as well of the Apple Blossom. But Skelly looking pretty good. Strobe or Brad Cox, okay, second. Tejano Twist, maybe a little bit disappointing at 9-5. That said, part of the appeal of Tejano Twist was, and Jim Byers mentioned it was a race that seemed to have a lot of speed, and that potentially could come back and play into the lap of a closer like Tejano Twist, and the fractions were fast and legitimate, but Skelly was pretty much out there on his own all the way. If you look at the chart, he's separated by at least a length and a half, couple of lengths most of the way around. So mentally, it seems like these horses can go fast and continue a lot more often if nobody's out there really pushing them. And that was the case yesterday with Skelly. So, again, nice performance by that one, and we shall see what is up going forward. But, again, I would expect, and being an Asmussen horse, I wouldn't be surprised to see that one right up here at Saratoga. Jenny Wiley was one of the big stakes on the card yesterday at Keeneland. Field of 6 went into the gate, and the overwhelming chalky favorite was in Italian. With the Moonlight was interesting for Charlie Appleby. Had come in off a couple of wins in Dubai this season, but had come to the United States last year and run second in the Lake Placid and the Belmont Oaks Invitational, and had won the Saratoga Oaks. So the Appleby horse was the second choice at 2-1 behind the chalky in Italian, and that's the way it played out. But there was no threat from the Appleby horse. I mean, if you had an Italian, you were not worried about it. You can see there in the green Peter Brandt silks in Italian on the front end, all the way around under Irad Ortiz, and in the stretch there's with the Moonlight coming up, and will eventually separate and be a clear second over White Frost. But as I say, no challenge for the winner in Italian. A finalist for the Eclipse Award last year for fillies and mares on the turf, and a really nice career so far for Chad and Peter Brandt. This makes it 6 wins and 10 starts with 3 seconds and a third. So really talented runner on the front end. It was a scratch-reduced field of 6, and she took them all the way around. And again, as you can see there, did it fairly easily over the Appleby European Invader. Also on the card yesterday at Keeneland was the Giants Causeway for fillies and mares sprinting on the turf. And the favorite did wind up to be Twilight Gleaming. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to shake out. Twilight Gleaming from Wesley Ward was 9-2 on the morning line with Irad Ortiz, but eventually went off at 5-2 as, kind of a lukewarmish favorite. I liked Ouvra. That one was kind of disappointing, running 9th as with the 4-1 second choice. So again, that was a little bit of a disappointment. I had Twilight Gleaming in the second spot after scratches. A logical contender. Again, a logical contender for the betting public as well. Had started the career with some nice promise, having run second at Keeneland back in 2021, then broke the maiden at Belmont, and then they're over to Royal Ascot, and they're on to France for some nice runs, and subsequently had run very well. Now, the lone disappointing performance on the resume was the Franklin last October right here at Keeneland, where the horse faded a little bit to run 4th. Hadn't been seen since then. The workouts weren't really indicating one way or the other, but it is Wesley Ward sprinting on the turf at Keeneland in the spring, and Twilight Gleaming lived up to that. Wesley Ward having a nice meet down there also, and Twilight Gleaming. Nice run here, the 10 horse, and you can see getting it done here. The chart margin will actually be a length and a half as Irad Ortiz kind of goes by. Hero bin Dorada, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the number 8 gets up for second at 87-1. Nice late run there to get up for second by a head. It was a scrum there for second, third, and fourth, and fifth. But Kurobin Dorada runs second. Star Divine runs third in there. But I said yesterday, if you were born on October 8th and those are your numbers, you wound up with a nice exacta, despite the fact that the winner paid $7.50. Again, is the 5-2 favorite. The exacta for a buck with an 87-1 shot underneath, $283. That's not bad, as I say, for the October 8th birthday, folks. They could have walked away with a nice day. And, the horse had the angle working that I've been talking about for a week and a half now since Keeneland opened. Since Keeneland opened. Came in from Turfway. And the Turfway horses, the last few seasons, I will reiterate, have done well. And I think given that Turfway was a little bit saltier this winter, that was bound to be potentially stronger. And I think maybe has. The Turfway runners have run well, and you've gotten some prices because they tend to get overlooked a little bit. And this was one of them, came in from Turfway. I mean, that was the angle you had to kind of lay on. There were some things to like. I want to race 2 back, but I don't know whether it's stacked up with this field. But if you were playing a little bit of that Turfway factor. Now, the problem is, in a race, and I've had this happen to me already over the past week, in a typical race, there might be 2 or 3 of these Turfway horses. And so who do you use? Who do you put in your mix? And sometimes you zig and they zag. But again, they're worth taking a look at over the next couple of weeks at Turfway. All right, let's also, yesterday, we talked to John Piasek from the Maryland Breeders because it was a nice day, stakes day, down at Laurel with Triple Crown implications. Preakness weekend. There are 2 win on this day and you're in May races, which are, their clever way of saying win and you're in. The Preakness and the Black Eyed Susan. On the Preakness side of things for the 3-year-old boys, it was the Federico Tessio. And, John and I had talked about this race, and it looked like Prince of Jericho or Coffee with Chris coming out of good tries in the Miracle Wood and the Private Terms. It looked like those were certainly the logical contenders. The betting public thought so, making Prince of Jericho the 9-5 favorite. And the second choice at 3-1 was Coffee with Chris. Both disappointed, both off the board, 5th and 6th. The winner, though, is a horse we touched on just a little bit, a shug horse. Number 7, Perform, is going to get it done at 10-1. 90% Maddie at 7-2 runs second. Summer Cause runs third. But the shug horse with Fergal Lynch on board gets it done, having broken the maiden in the prior start down at Tampa in, the first try around 2 turns down at Tampa. So maybe this is a horse that was just crying out for a little extra ground, and it took him a while to maybe figure that out because this was start number 7. So didn't break the maiden until start number 6 at Tampa. Subsequently, was at Shug's pace and base. But the last couple of workouts have been at Belmont. But you just had to kind of take notice that they just broke the maiden and they're confident enough to take a pop in the Tessio. And that was enough to maybe tilt you in that direction. And again, we talked about that. I thought the horse was a little bit interesting when we were talking about the race yesterday. It proved to be even more than interesting, getting it done. And, it wound up a little bit close with 90% Maddie coming a little bit. But I will say, Perform had a little bit of a trip. If you go back and watch the whole thing, there are some trouble lines in there to take note of, and so the win was maybe had a little extra punch to it. And we'll see. I didn't read anything one way or the other what they are thinking now, but again, a win in this race got you a berth in the Preakness starting gate. So we'll see what could be next for Perform. It would be interesting. That would be quite a scenario to take 6 starts, finally break your maiden over at Tampa, and then the next start win a stakes race, and then on to the Preakness, and a win there that would be quite a little 3-race run for the shug horse. But as I say, I didn't see one way or the other. We'll keep our eyes and ears open as far as Perform. And on the ladies' side, again, with a similar win this day, you're in May, win and you're in. In yesterday's Weber City Miss, the winner here gets a berth into the Black Eyed Susan. This one also a little bit of an upset at 7-1, but another horse that we kind of touched on yesterday. The favorite was Girl Trouble, and that we both thought that horse, both John Piasek and I thought that horse probably the one to beat, coming out of a series of nice races at both parks, and ran second in the Ruthless a couple of starts back. Girl Trouble at 3-5 winds up 6th and last. A poor performance there. Crypto Mama was maybe a little bit interesting as well for Kelly Breen. coming out of a win at Laurel back in March. But the winner is going to be Cats in the Timber. And again, we touched on this one a little bit yesterday, and one of the main reasons why. Brittany Russell, high percentage trainer over the past couple of years down in Maryland, gets it done. This was career start number 6, career win number 3. Cats in the Timber, number 7 at 7-1. Nice duel here. Crypto Mama was not giving up as the second choice at 8-5, but Cats in the Timber gets it done. Chart margins half a length. Crypto Mama second, 6 the Hardaway third. As I say, the disappointment, Girl Trouble at 3-5 last in the field of 6. But again, we shall see going forward for both Perform and Cats in the Timber whether they take up their spots. You would have to think, you get a free ride like that, you would have to think Preakness and Black Eyed Susan will be on the resume going forward. But again, we'll keep our eyes and ears open as far as that is concerned. And I mentioned earlier, because last week we weren't here on Easter, we didn't get to see the big 3 in recap here on Sunday morning last week, because there was no Sunday morning with no racing and wagering available in New York on Easter, which again is kind of a crazy anachronism, because these days you can still go to the racetrack on Easter and you can still bet, but it's a slot machine or roulette or whatever. So I'm not quite sure why they hang on to the horse racing side of things. But be that as it may, just to recap a little bit on some of those Derby preps from last week. And again, we'll talk Wood and Bluegrass with Bob Ehalt a little bit later on. But Santa Anita Derby. And I said, I think Practical Move with a couple of triple-digit buyers could wind up as the favorite. In my opinion, I said that on Steve's big radio show. He said, no way. He thought, the Pletcher name would pull it towards Forte. I'm going to be intrigued to see, but because this was a nice effort. We'll see Practical Move. He goes off as the even money favorite. Has to work with a horse that I thought was a little bit interesting last week when we talked with John White about this race. Mandarin Hero comes over from Japan. And Mandarin Hero, Practical Move's the 5, Mandarin Hero's the number 8. And Mandarin Hero is going to make Practical Move work. And Skinner is right in the mix as well. We talked about the John Sheriff's horse also. But it is very close. But it was a nice gutsy win for a Practical Move. And he pairs up triple-digit buyers at 100. But there are not a lot of triple digits this year among the 3-year-old class. I think when people sit down and start looking, those triple digits, pairing up a couple of them, are going to stick out a little bit. I'm intrigued to see where the betting public is going to go when they pull it, post-positional play into it a little bit, but what the morning line winds up to be. Mandarin Hero, unfortunately, there are a couple of Japanese runners, the one from Dubai a couple of weeks ago, Derma Sotogaki, that one's in, and another one won a win in your in race in Japan, and that one's in. Mandarin Hero, unfortunately, is sitting just on the outside, like maybe 4 away from making the 20, and so it may be tough for that one to get in. But that's unfortunate because that was a good-looking effort on the transfer from Japan. And it's, given what the Japanese horses have done internationally over the past couple of years, to have them invading the Kentucky Derby now is very intriguing. It'll be interesting to see what the 2 runners that are in the field can do this year, because I think particularly the one coming out of Dubai, I have a feeling is going to get a little action. Yeah, and it also makes a difference coming into the Derby, that last set of workouts, and typically Mike Welch is at Churchill, and there are a few other folks watching. And it's not so much somebody who really jumps off the page, although if there's a really good work, maybe that pays it something to pay attention to. But it's more, there's a horse that's maybe not seeming to look at the top of their form, because typically, you expect them all, they're all nice horses, you expect them all to work nicely. But as I say, maybe a workout that really stands out is worth taking a look at. But the ones that are more of note are, there was a dull performance from so-and-so. So we shall see over the next couple of weeks. It'll be fun. Now with yesterday's Lexington, the the points are done. You can go over to the Kentucky Derby website and pull up the points list and see who's there and who's just, on the cusp and maybe gets in depending on decisions by other connections. And again, knock wood, we hope everybody stays healthy, and it just comes down to connections deciding. And most of them these days decide, we're going, regardless. And I understand it. It is hard to ignore the siren call of the Kentucky Derby if you have a good 3-year-old, because it could be your only shot if you're, not one of the major outfits. But we'll see how it plays out. It's going to be fun, I think, over the next couple of weeks. All right, we'll take a break. Again, I've got a few minutes before we get to Bob Ehalt, so we'll come back and maybe give some thoughts for this afternoon, a little handicapping action, and then we'll take another break and bring Bob into the mix to do some more recap on not just yesterday, but again, some of the Derby preps earlier on. So take a break, come back, little handicapping and more right after this. Stay tuned.
Birdstone is an outside front. They're coming down to the finish. Can Smarty Jones hold on? Here comes Birdstone. Birdstone surges past. Birdstone wins the Belmont Stakes.
In front, but here comes High Chaparral. High Chaparral, the defending champ, to take it to Bob. These two arch rivals head to head with Joe Hart bearing down on them. It's going to be a 3-horse photo finish to the turn. Here's the wire. Photo finish.
Capital OTB is now streaming live on Roku. The RTN Racing channel on Roku lets you watch OTB TV live through your Roku device or your Amazon Fire Stick, rather than being limited to computers and mobile devices, which means you can now watch OTB live wherever you are. Simply open Roku, scroll to find the RTN channel, then click on OTB TV. OTB TV on Roku. Try it now.
Come on.
I want sales reports on my desk by Monday.
Whoops. My bad.
Love racing? RTN brings you every live simulcast on your home television, plus live video streaming and race replays on your PC and mobile devices. To order, visit rtn.tv. RTN, a breed apart.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. Seth Merrow in the studio. As always, thanks for joining us. Take a quick look at the late pick 4 at Aqueduct as we have a few minutes before we plug Bob in. And again, I'm not going to hand out a ticket or anything. I haven't seen scratches yet or whatnot, but we'll give you some ideas on the sequence. And today's late pick 4 at Aqueduct does start in race number 6, optional claimer, non-winners of 3, 1 mile. I'm 3, 2, 6, and 5 in the 6th. Stage Raider from Chad Brown. Look to have some talent so far in the career. Now, this is a horse, 5 years old, only 7 career starts, and hasn't been seen since last July. So I would expect a short price, and given the layoff and this being a lately raced 5-year-old, I could see somebody taking a shot against. And so, if you want to try to kick off that pick 4 with a little more value, I'm not really going to argue. But I do think Stage Raider, if the horse comes back showing the kind of talent that this horse has shown on better efforts, probably has a little bit of an edge on this bunch. But it's not out of the question that this horse will need a race. If you're looking for an alternative, market alert for Orlando Noda. 1-2 back in an optional claimer, was claimed out of that. They moved up a little bit to this level and ran an okay third. I think off the last couple fits nicely with this group. And then Curlin's Wisdom in the 3rd spot. Tried a stakes race last time at 1 mile and an 1/8, but the mile 2 back was very good. And again, fits with this group certainly. So for me, in the 6th at Aqueduct, 3, 2, 6, and 5. In the 7th at Aqueduct today, we're looking at starter allowance types going 1 mile and a 16th on the grass. In the 7th, I have it 8, 1, 4, and 6. I'm going to put Royal Spirit on top for Linda Rice. Seasonal debut down at Gulfstream was against this type of runner, in the condition book. And it wasn't much, ran 6th in a field of 7. But you get on the page, and it just seems like a better effort, coming back to New York, getting back into the Linda Rice barn, a little fitness under the belt now. It seems like we can expect a better effort. Now, I don't think we're going to move forward a lot, given what's on the page here, but I think if we get as I say, one of the horse's better tries, I think it's good enough to be competitive in here. But as you may realize from the way I'm hedging, I don't think this horse is a big standout. And so we're 3-1 on the morning line. You wouldn't want to go too short here. Bricko for Jim Bond hasn't been seen since last November, but certainly a better effort for this one is going to put this one right in the mix. And Jim Bond had a nice first-time starter yesterday by Caracante that I talked about during the afternoon, but I had second in my mix, and I kind of kicked myself that I wasn't bolder. I didn't quite see it going. I want to say 44-1. I didn't quite see it going at that price, being by Caracante, or maybe I would have been bolder. But it was a nice first-out winner for Jim Bond. So, yeah, first-out winner, he can have him ready off a layoff, and Bricko is one of those. And then Smoking Heat in the third spot. Most recently has been on the dirt, but if you go down the page to the turf races, probably contends here. In the seventh at Aqueduct, 8-1, 4, and 6. In the eighth race this afternoon, back on the grass, sprinting at 6 furlongs for non-winners of 1. Other than in the eighth race, I am 9, 4, 3, and 10. Runaway Rocket on top. Again, another one of those that the last couple of starts were on the dirt, but if you go back down to the turf races, I think is a solid fit. So we get back on the turf today for the seasonal debut. Should be in the mix. The number 4 for Chad Brown, Matacat Michael Dubbin Company, comes off a little bit of a disappointment down at Gulfstream to start the season. This horse had been over in Europe earlier in the career, so that was the United States debut. But it was also a stakes race off a layoff going back to last summer. Now gets in a more proper non-winner, so 1 should be a solid fit here. And then Hey There, yet another one of those getting back to the turf. This one coming off a couple of sprints on the synthetic at Turfway for Brad Cox, but I think is going to appreciate the grass again today in the 8th at Aqueduct. 9, 4, 3, and 10. And finally, in the 9th and final today at Aqueduct, going to go off a little after 5:30. I have a 2, 1, 10, and 9 at Aqueduct. I'll put Tumbles on top. First-time starter in one of those fields where I think you can go with the fresh face, quote unquote. The sire is a little bit interesting as a sire of win early types. Owned by the Matisse boys, and it's a homebred for Paul. So we're certainly rooting for this one. But again, it just seems like of those that have run, this is kind of a weak bunch. So take a little shot on this one, being a fresh face, a field of those that have had opportunities and haven't gotten it done and really haven't looked like a whole lot so far. Of those, Bustin' Roxy comes in off a good try last time that may bode well, and My Malibu Honey for our friend Roddy Valente. So again, there's some local connections floating around in this finale today. But this one comes in off a try down at Gulfstream in the career debut against Maiden Specials. So we are getting some notable class relief. Comes up to New York, drops in for a tag, but a state-bred tag as well. So My Malibu Honey may actually probably will wind up being the one to beat with the class move. In the 9th at Aqueduct, 2, 1, 10, and 9. All right, that gives you some ideas. Late pick for Aqueduct today. And again, we will be taking closer looks all afternoon on OTB Live. We'll be back with that in a couple hours or so, but we'll be back in a couple of minutes with more Racing Across America on this Sunday morning. When we come back, we'll be joined by our friend Bob Ehalt. You can see his work in the Blood Horse, America's Best Racing, and more. He did a little preview of both the Apple Blossom and the Lexington for the Blood Horse. And he's been doing some previews and recaps on some of the Derby preps. So we'll talk about all of that with Bob right after this. Stay tuned.
What if there was a way to become a better horse player, to have a better knowledge of the game, to be more successful? What if there were a way to take what you've learned, what you know, and make better decisions, better choices? In horse racing, knowledge is a powerful tool. Race results and replays, past performances and live streaming, wagering from all your digital devices. Capital OTB. Become a better horse player.
No matter where in the world you are, the excitement of wagering on horse racing is just a click away. You'll get live streaming, past performances, race replays, our virtual tote board, analysis and selections from professional handicappers, a simple, safe, and secure wagering platform, and best of all, you get track prices. CapitalOTBBet.com. Bet any place, anytime at CapitalOTBBet.com. And be sure to download our new mobile app from the iTunes Store or Google Play.
Capital OTB is now streaming live on Roku. The RTN Racing channel on Roku lets you watch OTB TV live through your Roku device or your Amazon Fire Stick, rather than being limited to computers and mobile devices, which means you can now watch OTB live wherever you are. Simply open Roku, scroll to find the RTN channel, then click on OTB TV. OTB TV on Roku. Try it now.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. As promised before the break, joined now by our friend Bob Ehalt. You see his work in the Blood Horse over at America's Best Racing and beyond. Bob, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Seth. How are you today?
Very good. Happy to have you on board because, as I touted earlier in the program, Blood Horse, you were doing some previews of a couple of the big races yesterday, so I thought we'd pick your brain a little bit. Apple Blossom and Lexington, but over the past few weeks, you've done some previews and reviews on some of the Derby preps, and it's that time of year. So I'd like your opinion on some of those races from the past couple of weeks as well. But let's kick it off, top of the show, with the Apple Blossom. And yesterday I had Jim Byers on, and earlier I showed the Count Fleet. And I said between the two stakes, the Count Fleet was the more interesting from a betting perspective. But although there was only a field of 4 yesterday in the Apple Blossom, Clariere and Secret Oath having another little showdown set things up to be interesting. And in a short field, there was a horse in there, Hot and Sultry, with the early speed that may have tried to steal the race. So it was an interesting scenario with only 4 horses, and it kind of lived up to things. Although for me, it was a kick in the pants. It's one of those I'm off kind of winners, because Clariere, I've loved Clariere throughout the career. But after the Azeri a couple of weeks ago, I just couldn't get past Secret Oath. We'll watch here a stretch run. It's a ding-dong battle. Clariere, who had trouble, the number 4 horse, just gets it over a Secret Oath. Hot and Sultry had tried to steal it, but she fades to 3rd in here. But as I say, Bob, maybe it wasn't a great betting race given the situation. But we're going to look at Clariere come here. This is incredible. Lived up to the expectations. It's just a really fun horse race.
Yeah, I mean, it was really a race where it was interesting to watch because the lone speed kind of went out. And you know, sometimes those races are difficult for the horses behind and the jockeys. What move do you make? Now, Secret Oath made the move, put her away, and I tell you, at the top of the stretch, I thought she was home free. I thought Clariere had just too much work ahead of her to try to catch up. But boy, did she close. And you know, I mean, hey, Secret Oath, to her credit, you never know sometimes, does the horse get to the front, it starts waiting for the other horses. I mean, she was kind of out there in the clear for quite a while. But boy, Clariere really did a great, turned in a great effort. I think so did Secret Oath. I mean, there's not much between them. I think they're both quality fillies. And, I think we're going to see some exciting battles in the division as the year goes on. Though I'm looking forward to where we could say have a true race where we get at least maybe 7 or 8 fillies in there so that, you're not into these races where the tactics might be compromised and horses might have to move sooner than they really want to. But certainly those are 2 real quality fillies. And boy, I'm looking forward to seeing some great action from that division as the year goes on.
Yeah, and even with the second place finish, Secret Oath passes the 2 million mark. Clariere was already by the 2 million mark, and it was a $1 million purse yesterday. And again, I'm with you. You want a nice bigger field where the tactics are a little more predictable, perhaps, or a little more to the favor of everyone having a fair opportunity. But given that and the situation yesterday, that makes it more impressive for Clariere, maybe. But I'm with you, and being up in the Saratoga area, I'm thinking personal ensign. I think that may suit both of these a little bit later in the year.
Yeah, because I think we're still a bit away from Nest getting back to the division. I mean, she only I think Saturday she put in her I think the first time work since the Breeders' Cup. It wasn't exactly overwhelming, which you didn't expect, but she's going to need 3 or 4 more works like that before she's ready. So I'm not sure if she'll make if she would make the late Troyenne at Churchill Downs Derby week. That gives her 3 weeks, only 2 more works. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, the division is just loaded with some really good fillies, and it's going to be fun to watch them bang heads.
Yeah, no question about it. Steve Asmussen made the cogent comment afterwards that nice of Stone Street to keep Clariere going at age 5, and I totally agree. Hopefully we can see these two and some of the others in the division facing up. But yesterday, again, it was only a field of 4, but lived up to all the expectations. That's a lot of fun. You also had a little preview of the Lexington, and this was kind of a fun race. There was only one horse in here that had an opportunity to maybe change things up points-wise to get into the Derby, and that was Disarm. And yesterday, right after the race, I thought Disarm was still a little short, but I had the points wrong. And so Disarm just got enough points to potentially get in. We'll see what they decide with Disarm. But Disarm wound up 3rd in here. I had First Mission in my mix. I thought a little bit of Demolition Duke was interesting. Demolition Duke, unfortunately, winds up running 5th in the field of 10. But we're looking at the stretch run right here, Bob, and this is a very good duel between First Mission and Arabian Lion. But First Mission pulls away a little bit late as the favorite. A little bit surprising there. Only the 3rd start for the Brad Cox runner, who broke the maiden just in the last start, now steps into stakes company and gets it done. But certainly Brad Cox and Godolphin with a promising 3-year-old, a little bit maybe of a late developer as far as Kentucky Derby, obviously, but we'll see this one certainly down the road. What were your thoughts in yesterday's Lexington?
Well, I think you look at it a couple of different ways. Let's take a look at the first 2. I mean, they're not going to the Derby, barring something that means you don't need points to go, because they certainly don't have anywhere near enough points to get in. First Mission, really good horse. I mean, the loss was to a very highly regarded horse, Bishop's Bay. So this horse seems to have a bright future. I like the way he showed a little bit of tenacity to get through on the rail, and certainly the Preakness looks like a great stepping stone for him. I know Arabian Lion was a horse that Baffert was high on. I mean, we saw this horse on Breeders' Cup the Friday, the Future Stars Day, run second to a horse at the time who looked like a good Brad Cox horse who really hasn't gone on in Giant Mischief, and looked like this horse was going to have a real bright future. Didn't run so well in the Los Al, and really didn't do much in the Robert Lewis after. But I think this performance really kind of showcased the talent this horse has. I don't know if he'll go to the Preakness. I mean, Bob is clear to, once he gets through this Derby, he's kind of clear to go wherever he wants with horses. We'll see. Has some speed, and that's always kind of dangerous, I think, at Pimlico a little bit. So we'll see what he decides with that, because, I don't know if this is a horse maybe you go to the Belmont with. I'm not sure. It's bred by a Triple Crown champion, so he's there. But I think those are two very good, promising horses we're going to see more of as the year goes on. The question mark is going to be Disarm. Now, does he go to the Derby? I mean, he got in. Now, I think what you have to look at here is a question of intent. The connections kind of came up. I had talked to them and kind of found out early on Monday that they were toying with the idea. And now you look and you say, well, he finished 3rd in the Lexington. Why are you going to go to the Derby? Again, it's a question of intent. Yeah. They knew they only needed a top 3 finish. Now, if Disarm gave his best shot in the Lexington and was 3rd, I think you might want to look for something different for him. But if he made a nice move on the turn, if the instructions for the jockey was pretty much like, you know what, hey, if you can win, win. But look at it as a paid workout. These horses normally work out go 5 or 6 furlongs every Saturday. Give the horse a paid workout. Don't push him. Just get the top 3, which he seemed kind of like when he was in the stretch. He was kind of keeping the other horses at bay for third. Maybe he could be a factor in the Derby because I know the connections were high on this horse from day one. We saw him at Saratoga with a big win at Saratoga in the maiden. And then, he had some issues at sideline until February. And he's been playing a little bit of catch up. So we'll see. I think if the connections decide to go, I think we're looking at the fact that maybe they were, the intent to win wasn't there, but just get in the Derby and then see what happens. Otherwise, maybe this is a horse they'll come back with on the Preakness, or, they'll look for other stuff.
I think you're absolutely right, though. This is one of those kind of crystal ball horses where you have to read the tea leaves a little bit to mix the metaphors. But it's a fairly quick comeback from the Louisiana Derby, so it does seem like maybe they were chasing points. And I'm sure, will talk to the jock and get the feel for how much were we trying, how much is left in the tank, and if the horse does show up and they do take the opportunity in the Derby, you would have to think they'll be well meant there. Arabian Lion, you're right, bounced back nicely after the last couple of starts, which are disappointing after the start of the career. And at the top of the stretch, you had to think Arabian Lion is in a really good spot here. But you mentioned it, coming up the rail, Luis Saez just has had a few nice rides down there at Keeneland so far at this meet, and that was one of them coming up the rail with First Mission. And as you stated, after the race, Brad Cox was kind of saying, I think the Preakness on the calendar is going to fit nicely. So you'd have to think First Mission. And he said, we'll see what happens in the Derby, but you have to think First Mission, probably at this point, they're pointing to the Preakness. And
I would think so. I think that's you're talking. You got 5 weeks, mile and 3/16 distance. A lot has to go. And I'd say Brad is just loaded with 3-year-olds in the barn. He's got a lot of them. I mean, there's certainly a lot of good ones. This one's not going to the Derby, and neither is Instant Coffee, who I think is a heck of a good horse. He just had that one bad effort. And with the point system this year, he had 32 points, and boy, he's not even close. He's not even close to getting a sniff. So Brad's got a lot of options going. We'll see. We got to see how many defections come to find out how many Derby starters he'll get, because one of his horses got knocked out. So we'll see what develops there.
Yeah, the point system has its pluses and minuses. And I know over the past week, Mark Cassie on the Oaks side of things has kind of been lamenting Wonder Whale Champion is kind of on the outside looking in there via the points. So we'll see how that shakes out as well. Let's go back to last week. Love to get some of your thoughts on some of the earlier preps, and we'll kick things off with the Wood Memorial. Boy, you want to talk about throwing a monkey wrench into the action here. Hit Show was clearly going to be the horse to beat and did go off as the 8-5 favorite. I took a little shot with Dreamlike, third start of the career for Todd Pletcher, and I thought that one was interesting. They both ran okay. Hit Show, the number 13, will run second. A close-up second, a close-up third is number 1, Dreamlike. But it's number 8, Lord Miles, 59-1, upsetting the apple cart here, and winds up with a 93 buyer. What were your thoughts on the result in the Wood?
Well, I think we're looking at Bourbonic 2.0. I mean, it was kind of a race like that. If you go back a few years, when Bourbonic staged a pretty big upset in the Wood for Todd Pletcher. When a horse wins like that, people, they always say, well, I've seen this. We saw this in the form, and because he got beat here, we had this or that. I got to say, I'm not big on. I don't know. I'd be willing to go against Lord Miles in the Kentucky Derby. I think it's a tough ask for him to keep, to repeat the effort he did. The Pletcher horse was third. The maiden, I thought, I thought he ran a pretty good race. Certainly, I think that, you don't want to rush a horse like this. And Pletcher and Rapoli have plenty of horses to fill, so I think they'll be pretty modest with where they go with him. Hit Show, it was his first race in 2 months. He really, there was banging, and there was an inquiry of the stretch, and there really was no way you could take anybody down because I think everybody was a little bit at fault in the situation. But Hit Show was in the middle. He got bagged by one. He got bagged by the other. Then he bagged the other horse. I don't know if he's good enough to be a factor in the Derby. But, I think he'll move. I think he should move forward off the wood. If he does, if it doesn't knock him out, I do think he could go forward. He might be a horse who can maybe sneak into your superfecta in the Derby. I'm not sure if he's a winner, but as I say, I think that was a very helpful race for him, given that he was off for the 2 months, and he did show some tenacity in taking all that bumping, and he stayed with it and ran, which is certainly something you're going to look for in the Derby because there's going to be some bumping and trying to get through horses at that race.
Yeah, you make a great point. Hadn't been seen since the win in the Withers on February 11th, so was on the sidelines for a couple of months and left from the outside post position with the scratch left from the 12 at the mile and an 8, so had to overcome that. So going to be interesting to see. And, yeah, Lord Miles, I mean, the buyer figure jumped up. His lifetime best prior was a 79. He gets a 93. Safi Joseph runner. I'm with you. It'd be tough to kind of jump on board in the Derby, but it'll be as always with a horse like that. It's going to be interesting to see what he goes into the gate at, what the betting public does with him. All right, let's take a look at the Bluegrass. You mentioned Pletcher having some other runners, and a couple of them notable, Tapatrice and Forte. And we'll take a look at those races. First, we'll look at last week's Bluegrass, and we'll see Tapatrice get it done in here, and does it with a nice 99 buyer, a very solid number that I think will have people very intrigued in a couple of weeks in Louisville. Number 1, Tapatrice gets it done, verifying number 3 for Brad Cox, and Blazing Sevens for Chad Brown runs third in here. But again, Tapatrice, I think, off of the really nice, visually impressive win in the Tampa Derby, but particularly off the Bluegrass win with the 99 buyer, I think this horse is going to attract a lot of attention in a couple of weeks.
Oh, I think without question he will. He's done very little wrong in his career. You have to, you've got to be totally impressed with the horse. He does. I think he does tend to be a little bit more lethargic in the beginning than his stablemate Forte, who Pletcher has, is probably going to be, who should be the favorite in the Derby. So there you wonder if he's going to really get himself into a little bit more trouble than he's used to, or not used to, but than he can handle in the Derby against much better horses or much deeper fields. So I'm not sure, but I kind of found it interesting if you watch what Tapatrice is doing with that kind of late kick, and especially the one he showed in Tampa, and Forte in the Florida Derby. It seems these Pletcher horses are kind of coming out of nowhere in the stretch to win these races. This one that wasn't the style he used in the Bluegrass. He showed he had a pretty good stretch battle to get up, but certainly he looks like a contender. He's definitely going to be one of the betting choices on Derby Day. I think it'd be interesting to see what kind of post he gets, and where he'll be breaking from, and verifying's a heck of a good horse. I mean, he made Tapatrice run his best to get by him, and as I said, Brad Cox has got he's got an abundance of them that are pretty talented, and certainly he's a horse who hasn't really turned in a bad effort per se, and I think he's one to keep an eye. He's another one who, when you look over the Derby, you're always saying, my God, I got 12 horses here I like. Well, when you get to that 12 for this year's Derby, I think he's going to be one of them in there.
Yeah.
You can't really just dismiss.
Yeah, he was a neck back on the chart, and with Tapatrice getting a 99, verifying had to be right there as well. So that number is going to attract people also. And that I totally agree. Nice performance there for the second place finisher as well. I was intrigued a couple of weeks back by the result of the Arkansas Derby. Why? I had grabbed a little Angel of Empire in one of the earlier future pools at 38-1. I liked him a couple of weeks ago in the Arkansas Derby and got 9-2 there, which I thought was fair as well. And we'll watch the stretch run. It will be number 6, Angel of Empire, for the aforementioned Brad Cox, who again is kind of loaded. King Russell 3rd, Reincarnate 4th. Rocket Can, I was slightly surprised Rocket Can was the favorite in here at 5-2, but that one runs 4th. But Angel of Empire gets it done for Brad Cox, winning the Arkansas Derby after having just previously won the Risen Star down at the fairgrounds. What were your thoughts on the result in the Arkansas Derby?
I like that. I mean, I like the horse coming in, and I would say coming out of the race, if I had to give you my early line on my Derby picks, it would probably be Forte, followed by Angel of Empire. Talking to the connections a bit before the race, they really feel this horse loves distance, and that as the races get longer, he's going to get better. And certainly, I think he showed here at the Arkansas Derby, the 1 1/8, that he probably wants that extra, that extra quarter of the extra distance of going the extra furlong in the Kentucky Derby. So you're talking. That's the key part of the Kentucky Derby. Who's going to handle the 10 furlongs? I feel pretty strongly that this is a horse who has the makeup to handle the 10 furlongs. So I'm in his corner for the Derby. I'm definitely going to use him high in my picks. And as I say, I was very impressed with the effort he turned in.
Yeah, it was a 94 buyer. And again, I'm biased here, but I was pretty happy with the performance as well. And looking forward to him heading towards Louisville, certainly first Saturday in May. See if I can get that future bet to make a little action. And finally, love some thoughts. Before we went on the air, I was telling you we were down covering the Florida Derby. That was a lot of fun. Certainly nicer weather down there a couple of weeks ago than they had this past week down in that area, which worked out for us. But, boy, this was some race. We'll watch him around the far turn. And number 4, Maj, is going to pass number 11, Forte here. You can see the chicklets. And as Maj kind of floats right by Forte, I thought on the turn, well, Forte's done. And then just a spectacular late run. Now, after the race, the time turned out to be wrong. They retimed the race. The immediate after the race buyer was 98. It was subsequently downgraded to a 95 for Forte. But, man, we're watching here, Bob, and I'm still thinking he's not going to win the race, but he keeps coming and coming. The chart margin winds up to actually be a length here late. That was some performance by Forte, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, it was visually impressive. And as I mentioned before, if you watch Tapit Trice in the Tampa Bay Derby and you watch Forte in the Florida Derby, both horses trained by Todd Pletcher, at the top of the stretch, late on the turn, you didn't think they were going to win. And certainly you looked and you said, all right, well, Forte, all right, well, look, he was basically in the Derby field by winning, having enough points. So you figure, okay, this was his little off race. And boy, did he close, because certainly you were right. Mage got first run on him. And that sometimes, at a track like Gulfstream, which is pretty good for speed, getting that first move, getting the first move is big. And he, as I say, the first run wasn't enough for him to hold off Forte. So look, hey, Forte is going to go, it's hard to kind of point to something that's telling you, well, I don't like this about Forte. I mean, look, he's doing everything you could ask of the horse. He certainly looks like he could get himself out of trouble. As horses keep winning, sometimes you do wonder, well, hey, they're not machines. At some point they get beat. Maybe it'll be the Derby. I don't know, but I think certainly I don't see a reason to look past him. It will be interesting to see how the betting goes. What kind of price are you going to get on Forte? We'll see the post. I mean, certainly I don't think anybody wants the rail. And if he gets drawn 20, horses can win from there, but that does reduce the margin of error for the horse. But I didn't see anything at all in the Florida Derby that tells me somebody else should be the favorite in the Derby. Forte is your horse to beat. Not saying he isn't. He's not going to be beaten, but I think on paper going in, he's your favorite. He deserves it, and the race kind of revolves around him.
Yeah, it's really intriguing. Certainly, the last couple of rounds of preps with Forte, Angel of Empire, Tapit Trice, Practical Move. It's just, I think, setting up to be a lot of fun. It's going to be fun to watch the next couple of weeks. I was checking today. Angel of Empire has worked out. Forte yesterday had to work before he heads up to Kentucky, and all systems are go now. And I mentioned earlier that I was reading that the cutoff line for the points is maybe a little bit higher than it is historically. And part of that is, and I'm knocking wood, everybody is held together health-wise, and hopefully that continues over the next couple of weeks. And the storylines are just who's working better than who, and people are making their decisions, because I think it's shaping up to be an intriguing race.
Yeah, and I think there's one of the key points with the points is, too, that the way they expanded the points. These horses are getting a lot more for finishing like third and fourth. And that really is kind of factoring into the mix, because, it used to be if you finished second in a race like the Wood or the Bluegrass, you're automatically in. And you have some of these horses who are picking up, there are horses with 40 points who are not getting in, which you kind of wonder about. Look, we know it's inevitable. Somebody from the top 20 as of today is not going to be there on Derby Day. So one or two of the horses might be able to get in, but, you're going to have to wait to see on that. But, I think it's going to be a very interesting Derby. And I'm going to say this. I would not sleep on the Japanese horses. I know people are going to say, "Oh, see, last year we all talked about them after how they did it at Dubai and how they did in Saudi Arabia," and the horse flopped. But he also, for some dumb reason, I don't know, was chasing the suicidal pace. Look, these Japanese horses are just trained spectacularly by their connections. They're really good, solid racehorses. One day, I think a Japanese horse is going to win or be a factor in the Derby, and I'm willing, as a bettor at least, to put some money on them because, as I said, what you see in the other divisions now, maybe there is something almost like what Wesley Ward mines in Ascot, where there's a kind of a hole for the 2-year-olds and Europeans. Maybe the Japanese horses need a little bit more time to reach their peak. But the way they dominated the UAE Derby, maybe this is the year you finally get a Japanese horse to be a major factor. And you'll probably get a better price this year, because people are going to look at last year and say, I got fooled by them last year. Don't fool me twice. But I think last year you got to admit that horse showing the early speed that he did was not the wisest of moves.
It's funny you brought that. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just before you started on the Japanese, I was going to bring up the winner of the UAE Derby, Derma Sotogaki, who I think is going to take a little bit of action. I think the horse is going to attract. And I mentioned earlier, because I played the Practical Move Santa Anita Derby, I said it's unfortunate that on the points, Mandarin Hero, who ran second in the Santa Anita Derby, is on the outside looking in, because I thought that was a pretty good performance as well.
Yeah, I mean, that as I say, that probably will help the price, because that horse ran really well, but we're not exactly sure. Maybe he's the best of the Japanese. We don't know. That's why you gotta, in a sense, with a race like the Derby, sometimes you gotta take a stab and maybe things. I don't think with the Derby you could completely follow the speed figures and such, because you are asking the horses to do something they've never done before. That final eighth of a mile could kind of be where it catches up with them. and they don't get back to the numbers they were running. I've got faith that the Japanese horses have enough stamina to handle the 1.25 miles. There are two of them. One beat the other, so I'm going to kind of feel that, as you say, the Derma Sotogati is going to do probably better than the other one, Continuare. I'm not a radio guy like you. I type these days. I don't say it, but that other one, hey, he's probably going to be a bigger price because he got beat. So, he's one to keep an eye on too, just in case, because I certainly don't think the connections would come halfway across the world if they did think the horse had a chance to do something. So, yeah, they add a little bit more intrigue to the whole mix, and it just adds a lot more fun for handicappers, because you're going to get a pretty good, whatever you hit, you're going to get a pretty good payoff.
Certainly, the Japanese runners have been making a lot of noise internationally over the past couple of years. And I said earlier that the Derby is probably sitting there just kind of waiting for them as well, because regardless of where they've gone, they've done very well. Bob, only have a couple of minutes left, but before we go, I just wanted to let you touch on and maybe alert people to what you wrote about in the Blood Horse this week as far as Maryland racing. I found it kind of eye-opening, because your article says, given the financial situation there and whatnot, Maryland racing may go contract to one racetrack. But what I found funny was, between the two, Laurel and Pimlico, they're talking Pimlico as that track.
Yeah, I mean, look, I prefaced it in the story. This is not like, hey, this is going to happen. I kind of spelled out, here's the reality of the situation. Fill in the blanks. And when you fill in the blanks, I have not heard anyone who said that the state and the city will not refurbish Pimlico. So it's probably going to take the entire, virtually most of the pool of money to refurbish Pimlico. And Laurel, as you continually see problems with the racetrack. The racing surface has big time issues, and because of a tax problem, money that is poured into Laurel by the state to fix it is going to cost a capital gains big time issue for the first racing people. So it really leads to an inevitable situation. The train left the station to the plan that they had 3 years ago to fix both tracks. That plan is gone. The cost of it now is skyrocketed from about $300 million or $350 to over $600 million. And where are they going to come up with the extra $200 million? No one has an answer for that. So you kind of read the tea leaves, and it tells you they're only going to fix one track. And then you start going into other situations. What will the first racing people do with a Laurel facility that is in major need of repair? If they can't use state money because of the tax consequences they face, are they willing to put in $200 million of their own money to fix Laurel? I'm not sure, especially the fact that there's no supplemental gaming to help the owner of, like, say, Laurel. Years ago there was hope that they could bring gaming into Laurel. Back then the Magna people, who was still first racing, but they mishandled an application, and it's costing them dearly. So it's not official, and maybe somebody could find an answer. But I've talked to the major people involved in this, and not one of them has viewed to me, we have the answer. Don't worry about it. Sometimes you could, people can't say things publicly, and behind the scenes they'll tell you, yeah, no, we got it under control. We got this. We just can't say anything. No one has expressed anything at all to me. If anything, they're looking at it like, yeah, this is kind of the best we feel we can do, and it will be interesting. But as I say, the major part is there is the talk to save a racetrack is Pimlico. It was Pimlico that started the situation a few years ago with the $375 million in bonds. because the city and state wanted to keep the Preakness in Baltimore. They're not giving up on that. That's basically what the legislature wants. And again, the problem that they've run into, 370, because of the inability to get it off the ground immediately because of COVID, costs going up, the bonds, because the interest rates have gone up, those bonds that were worth $375 million is maybe worth $250 million today. So, that's why the whole plan had to be scrapped, to try to come up with some new financial ways of going. But the people have told me they have to live within their means. They're looking at a pool of maybe $400 million, and to try to fix Pimlico and Laurel, you need another $200 million. And then again, if you fix Laurel, if the state decides to fix Laurel, well, it's going to cost First Racing about somewhere between 20 to 40 million in capital gains. Are they willing to put that? Do they feel that Laurel is worth that much money to them that they could take that tax hit? So it will be interesting, I'd say, by the end of the year to see what happens with that. Certainly, maybe somebody could come up with a great solution, but I haven't heard anyone who has what they feel the answer. If anything, they're talking about more people kind of talking about the idea of a like Delmar situation running Maryland Racing and Pimlico. The state would own the track, and then you get an operator to come in and do that. Now, who wants to be the operator of it? That's, again, the question. There's certainly not as much money to make from operating these tracks. And when you don't have the gaming to give you an additional revenue stream, the incentive to be an operator is reduced. And the Horsemen is kind of, they don't seem to be keen on the model like in New Jersey, where they do have substantial gaming to help them. So certainly it's going to be interesting to see what's happening. But let's face it, they've had 3 years to get that other plan through, and they could not find solutions. So to think that they're going to all of a sudden find that magic bullet in the next month or two and say, oh, hey, here's how we do it. Here's how we build 2 state-of-the-art racetracks. So that's a big long shot thinking that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I would tell people to go read your article for the full recap of the info. And again, it was a little bit eye-opening because, after inexplicably kind of missing the boat with the gaming a few years ago, it seemed like Maryland, which traditionally is kind of a solid peg in American racing, but it seemed like they had kind of righted the ship. But, this puts a whole new aspect to take a look at, certainly. And again, find that in the Blood Horse. Bob, otherwise, appreciate the conversation today, some of the previews and the recaps and whatnot. Again, tell people to check out your work at the Blood Horse and America's Best Racing. And as I say, we appreciate the visit, and we'll talk again.
Thanks, Seth. Won't be long before I see you at Saratoga.
Exactly. Looking forward to it. Bob, thanks. Bob Ehalt from, again, Blood Horse and America's Best Racing, all of which will bring us to a wrap-up. We've gone a little long, but I have my monitor up here. Nobody has started their pregame or anything yet, so we aren't missing anything at this point. But we will wrap it up and send you out to some of the action because, as I say, the pregames should kick off shortly, Keeneland or New York or beyond. As far as me, I'll be back in about an hour or so, a little over an hour with OTB Live for Sunday afternoon. I have some Aqueduct, some Keeneland, and some Oaklawn that I'll be looking at. Saratoga Harness, of course, is in action this afternoon as well for those fans on the Selkie side. And one more reminder, we'd love to have you come down here to the Clubhouse Racebook today for the $100 Play the Board contest. Come down, grab a little lunch, or just enjoy the horse racing action and perhaps win a little extra something with the Play the Board contest this afternoon here at the Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. Don't forget, Derby seats can be reserved now, too, here at the Clubhouse. If you'd like to come down Derby Day, stop by and reserve your seat for Derby Day here at the Clubhouse as well. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. For Racing Across America on a Sunday morning, Seth Merrow, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your watching always. And again, invite you back here in about a little over an hour or so for OTB Live on a Sunday afternoon. We'll see you then.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.